I chose this particular picture for a reason. And I don't know how well it shows up, but it's a picture I took out my back of my property a couple of years ago. And the reason I picked this picture, and I searched it out, is because of its ambiguity. Depending on whether you're looking east or west, this could be a picture of a sunset. And if you look behind the sun, you see there's a bank of dark clouds behind the sunset. And so this picture could represent the end of a time of darkness, a time of rain, of storms. And it could be the end of that era with the sun setting. Or, turn around, it could just as easily be a sun rising with a huge bank of clouds behind the sun coming today to darken the beautiful blue sky that we have today. And we, as a people, are always making our choice about where to look and what lens to look through. And some people will look at this picture and say, oh, it's a new day. The darkness is gone. The storm is gone. We're moving into a new era of light and joy and peace. And others will look at that same slide and just as logically say, here comes the storm. It's going to get ugly. And it all depends on the lens that you look through when you look at the world, how you see this slide. If you look through a lens of fear, you'll see one thing. If you look at the world through a lens of faith, you will see something else. And that is true every day, everywhere you go. Everything you do, you're always looking at the world through a lens. And it may be fear or it may be faith. And of course, our challenge as Christians is to grow in faith, and faith and fear being two sides of the same coin. As we grow in faith, our fear shrinks. So in our gospel today, Mark's gospel starts with two healing stories. It's a story about two men. One is a leper, and Jesus heals him, and one is a paraplegic, and Jesus tells him to walk, and he walks. So in an early version of Title 9, Mark's gospel said, well, I just healed two men, now I got to heal two women. And so today's gospel is about the healing of two women, one of whom has bled for 12 years, horrible disease, and the other one is actually beyond sick and has actually died. And two very big differences about these two stories is that in the first story, or in the story of the woman with the hemorrhage, she comes to Jesus. She doesn't know Jesus. Nobody really does. He just showed up a few months ago or a year ago. And but she's heard rumors about this guy. And somehow deep in her heart, she has decided that she thinks this guy's for real. And she has made up her mind that if she can just touch this guy, it will cure her of her disease. That's a great statement of faith. That's a person that's not messing around. And so she gets up and goes to town and finds the crowd, and she fights her way through the crowd, and she finally gets up to Jesus, and she reaches out and she touches his cloak. And immediately, it says immediately, she's cured. Now that is a statement of how faith works. If you have strong enough faith and you get on your feet and you walk that faith, you will get what you need. So the second story differs in that the little girl doesn't know anything about Jesus. She doesn't know anything about it. She's 12 years old. She plays, she hangs out with her friends. She doesn't know anything about Jesus. She doesn't know anything about faith. But she has an intercessor. She has somebody who cares about her, who happens to be a Pharisee named Jairus. That's not it. That's close. Jairus. Okay, you might be right. You might be right. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. It's her dad. That's what matters. So her dad is a Pharisee, which means he's a priest of the Jewish tradition, which doesn't have anything to do with Jesus. And in fact, the Pharisees are very much afraid of Jesus because they don't like the fact that he's doing these miracles and doing all this wonderful stuff, and these people are following him, and they're not listening to the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the ones that eventually will put Jesus on the cross. But this particular Pharisee somehow got it in his mind that there's a chance this guy might be for real. And I'm desperate because my daughter is dying. And so I'm going to put my faith on the line, and I'm going to go to Jesus, and I'm going to say, please help me. And this is the second part of faith. The second way that faith works in our lives is not only can I go to Jesus and ask for help, but I can ask for help for you. Or you can ask for help for me. And Jesus is every bit as willing to intercede by somebody else's intercession than by own. And if you look at that in the broad scale, that's why we do intercessory prayer. That's why we pray for each other. Because not only does God listen to us and our needs and what we want and what we need from God, God listens when we intercede for other people. And it's just as she got up immediately too. There was no hesitation because you didn't come to me. It doesn't matter how we go to Jesus or who brings their faith to bear. Jesus responds exactly the same. Jesus hadn't been around that long, and people didn't really understand yet. He was another prophet coming around and healing people and breaking bread and feeding people and doing stuff. And they'd had a few people like that have come and gone over the years. And they didn't really yet understand that this really was the reason that Jesus came. And it never really occurred to people because the Pharisees, they were all rich and wealthy and they lived in palaces. And it never occurred to them that one of these sandal-wearing, broccoli in his teeth, humble guy would come and represent God and come not for the Pharisees in the temple, but to come for the people. And specifically for the people that are broken, for the people that are looked down on, for the incomplete, for the imperfect. Those are the people that Jesus came for. And those are the people that he still comes for. The psalmist evidently had a whiff of this because the psalmist wrote about, I'm going to say these two stories. O Lord, my God, I cried out to you, and you restored me to health. You brought me up, O Lord, from the dead. You restored my life as I was going down to the grave. Sing to the Lord, you servants of his. Give thanks for the remembrance of his holiness. This is the Christian tradition. This is the base of what we believe as Christians. There's nothing more fundamental about Christianity, about than the fact that God sourced us, created us. Jesus comes to help us. Jesus cares about us. And the Holy Spirit lives within us. Again, bringing us blessings and leading us to joy, leading us to the light. So that's a very foundational piece of who we are as Christians. My opinion. Everything I say is my opinion. Don't hold Shepherd of the Hill accountable for anything that I say. That's what I say. So as a nation, as Americans, which I'm guessing most of us here are also, we also have foundations of what it means to be an American. And coincidentally, they very closely coincide with the foundations of our Christian faith. And I'm not going to go to the Declaration of Independence and all of that, but I would just like to briefly read a statement that I think is really sums up nicely who we are as a nation, where we come from, what we stand for, what the roots of our nation are that hold us up. And it happens to be words that are on a small brass plaque at the bottom of a statue at the Port of New York City. And she has been standing there since 1886, which is half of the life of this nation. She has stood with her torch and represented these words. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here is our sea-washed sunset gates, shall stand as a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name is Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities frame. Keep your ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Wow. Makes you proud to be an American, doesn't it? To be that beacon to the world of light and freedom and a place of refuge for all. These are the words, these are the foundations of a nation living out the call of Christ, in my opinion. Jesus did not come to make anyone first. He did not come to make anyone better than anybody else. He did not come to separate us by caste or by race or religion or economics. He came to make us all one, all the same. In the story from the gospel, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." Powerful words to get above our fear and replace our fear with faith that God is sovereign, that the promises of our faith are true, and this too is going to be all right. somehow the sun is going to come up and the skies are going to clear. Fear is the source of great power in our lives. And fear is really easy to tap into. All you have to do is squirt a little lighter fluid. You can make people afraid. All you have to do is raise your voice and shout loud, call names, threaten to punch somebody. It's really easy to grab onto fear and to try to use it as a power to move other people. Faith is hard. Faith is hard because in faith we have to resist the input from our senses. We have to look into the storm and see the storm and saying, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. That storm is not going to take me. It takes a lot of inner strength to find faith. Where fear, pull a gun. I mean, it's that simple to use fear. So part of what we need to do as a nation is decide whether we want to be feared or respected in the world. And I think that was a huge, a very clear distinction that showed up from what they were calling a debate. Now, faith doesn't resolve fear. Faith doesn't overcome fear. And fear is part of us. We're human beings, and there's a part of us that fear will always populate. But what faith does is it just goes right over fear. It's like a stream flowing over a rock. Yeah, the rock is there, but the faith ain't paying any attention. The faith is moving on, just as if the rock wasn't there. And I'm a believer that we have a God that cares about us and that intervenes in our lives and helps us to move in good directions and hinders us from moving in bad directions. My life is a trail of bad decisions that went badly. And I went, oh, maybe this is not the way I should go. Let's try another direction. And maybe that one went badly too. And then I said, well, maybe I'll try something else. And all of a sudden I picked a direction where it was like I was paddling upstream my whole life. And suddenly I turned the canoe around and all of a sudden I'm going with the current. And things went a lot better for me since then. And I think God does all kinds of things in our life to help us move in the right direction. Fear and intimidation, shame and guilt, these are not tools that God uses to help us become closer to God. Anytime you're under fear or intimidation, or you're feeling shame or guilt, that's not God trying to teach you something. That's some other force in your life trying to move you in some other direction, my opinion. God's faithfulness to us is complete and without question. God's grace is always adequate for the task at hand. So how do we continue to build the kingdom in this environment that we find ourselves in today? How do we continue to press forward towards the light, away from the darkness, away from the storm to peace and quiet waters? How do we stare into the face of fear and darkness and continue to follow Jesus's footsteps, to walk in faith even as the clouds gather? We have to live every day walking in our faith, resisting the urge to quit or to go backwards, which would be so easy. We walk in courage and righteousness despite the tempest and the fury that rages around us. We lift up and feed the part of the divine that dwells within us as Jesus has compelled. Our faith allows us to sail like Jesus and the disciples, with fair winds and a following sea. So, brothers and sisters, come now together, all of us. Let us feed our faith and drown out our fears.